Hey guys, it's Dr. May. How are you? Hope you're good. I'm back today for another Radically Open DBT lesson. Okay, so this is lesson 13. All right, so we're still in the mindfulness module here, and we've moved on from the what skills to the how skills. Okay, and the how skills, they actually added one from original DBT. So this one is self-inquiry, which we've heard about before, but they actually count this as a how skill. So although we've gone over this before, they add to our knowledge about self-inquiry in this lesson. So even if you've listened to lesson 1, Flexible Mind Definitely, or some of the other lessons I have where there's self-inquiry practice, there's still a little extra info here. So it's still worth checking out if you want to learn just a little bit more, okay? So I just wanted to give you a disclaimer about that in case you're thinking, why is there yet another one? Well, part of it is because it's considered a really essential, important skill. So it's really something that helps us when we're feeling closed. It helps to get us more open, okay? So lesson 13, the core mindfulness how skill with self-inquiry, right? So it's actually considered the core how skill, all right? So what the heck are how skills anyway? It sounds kind of funny, right? Right, so last time we talked about what skills: observe, describe, and participate. So those are like what you could do to be more mindful, right? So they're techniques we could employ to increase our awareness about ourselves and what's going on. So we could observe openly, we could describe with humility, and we could participate without planning, okay? So those are the radically open DBT version of the what skills. So the how skills, there's 4 of them, but today we're just going to do self-inquiry. Okay, so inquiry, E or I is the same word, right, as we talked about in other videos. So this is about how we can best engage in the what skills, right? So for example, today we're talking about self-inquiry. So when we question ourselves, when we look at more carefully why we're thinking certain things, what is this thought all about? Why am I engaging in this pattern? Is that helpful? What can I learn from this situation? When we start asking ourselves these questions, we're widening the scope of what we're observing, right? Because we're looking at ourselves more closely, right? So see how we could observe by using self-inquiry, right? And as we ask ourselves these questions and come up with additional thoughts about it, it gives us more words to describe our experience. Describe, okay? And it actually can even help us participate without planning, because if you shake up your old patterns by questioning yourself and why you had them and whether they're still working for you, it might open you up enough that you're more able to participate without planning. It'll get you less rigidly stuck in your usual behaviors. It'll free you up to do more things. Okay, so it's a skill that could really apply to all the what skills. All right, so what is self-inquiry, right? So I did define it in the other video, but I'm going to add a little bit more this time, okay? So ultimately, it starts with turning toward an uncomfortable experience. So let's say we're feeling vulnerable or uncertain or uncomfortable or picked on or rejected or questioned, and we're feeling on the spot, and we're used to just jumping to a defensive behavior. It's the perfect time to stop and instead look toward the uncomfortable experience and start questioning what's going on, right? Kind of asking ourselves questions to figure it out and understand it better, all right? So, but it starts with that as a trigger. So it's challenging our core beliefs, right? Instead of just going along with the pattern, we're kind of breaking it up a little bit by asking ourselves what this is all about. What is this response telling me? Well, that kind of thing, right? So it models humility because it questions us, right? If we're not humble, we're above reproach. We can't even be questioned. We already know it. We're totally right. It's a fixed mind point of view, right? So if we want to move to a flexible mind, we have to realize that we don't know it all. Things that I think may not be true. I see things not as they are, but as I am, right? So when I realize that, and you know, I can be questioned, it's a very humble approach, right? So with humility. Okay, so it also helps me take responsibility for my thought patterns, right? And when I realize, you know, I question them a little bit more, I start to realize, like, they're my thoughts, they're my reactions, they're my defenses, they're my patterns. No one's making me do any of them, right? I have to own up to them. I mean, luckily, the good thing is when I use self-inquiry and I understand them better, I can start to make different choices. So I could also be responsible for making better choices. But if I stay stuck, that's also my responsibility, right? So it kind of puts it on me. Well, when it puts it on me, it also gives me the power, right? Okay. So it celebrates the pursuit rather than the attainment of truth. So by asking the questions, it's not about getting the right answer, so to speak. It's about asking a good question. So a question that can kind of open things up for me more and increase my insight and understanding and awareness. So when I ask more and more kinds of skillful questions, that's like bringing me in a closer to the real truth. I may not ever know the full truth, right? Who knows the whole truth? I mean, you have to really widen your lens, but it can at least make my lens a little bit wider. It can increase my view so that I have a better, more clear, fuller understanding. Okay, so I could question my self-inquiry, right? I could do a practice of it today and gain some new insights, and do a self-inquiry practice on the same topic a few weeks from now. And the insights I came up with today maybe feel old at that point. I might come up with even clearer stuff by then, right? So just because I come up with some insights today, it doesn't mean that's the be all and end all, right? So I could even question the wisdom that I come up with, right? Because nothing's set in stone. Things can change as I learn more and more. Okay. And the good part about self-inquiry, as I was trying to hint before, is that it gives us the opportunity to be more open. It gives us more possibility, the opportunity to do something new rather than stay stuck in the same old patterns, okay? So the creation of new meanings, new insights, new behaviors, right? So it helps us grow and move in a better direction in our life, hopefully, right? Okay, so here's some myths about self-inquiry. So again, it's not about finding a good answer, it's about finding a good question, one that leads us closer to our quote unquote, our edge, right? So it's the edge of our understanding. When we start to gain new insights, we kind of learn a little bit more, even if it's a little bit painful to understand more or to look at certain things. So it's not about ruminating, right? So we're not going to ask our questions over and over again in kind of a pejorative, self-damning kind of a way, right? It's supposed to be to help us, right? And it should be 5 minutes or less. So it's not about getting down on yourself, beating yourself up, or creating what they call unhelpful self-doubt, which I'll talk about later, okay? So it's also not about blaming others or expecting the world to change. Like I was saying a couple minutes ago, it's about owning up to your side of, your side of things. Owning up to the fact that you think a certain way or behave a certain way, right? So it becomes more clear where our choices were when we do some of the self-inquiry practice. Okay, now this is an interesting one, okay? Self-inquiry is not coping strategies, okay? So when we cope with a painful emotion or a painful situation, we're trying to change the emotion, we're trying to move away from it, or maybe distract from it, or validate it. But that's not what self-inquiry is about. And that's not to say that coping skills are not useful, because they're definitely useful and we need them. But if you're doing this particular process, it's not about changing the pain or making it go away. It's staying with it and deepening your view, right? So this is where the observe comes in. I want to observe it even more fully. I want to dive even deeper. And the questions lead me to do that, okay? So it might hurt a little, but in the process, I'm going to learn a lot, all right? So it's a different goal than a coping skill, okay? All right, and finally, self-inquiry doesn't mean that truth doesn't exist, right? Truth, a bigger truth is always out there, but it leads us a little closer to understanding it, okay? So just because we come up with more of the truth, it doesn't mean it's the whole truth, but it doesn't mean truth doesn't exist. All right, sounds a little philosophical, and it also doesn't mean we shouldn't trust our intuition, because sometimes if we're not careful, we could kind of reasonable mind our way out of our intuition. We could start to question ourselves when we really should be trusting ourselves, right? So sometimes, let's say, you feel like you're in a little bit of a dangerous situation, you're around somebody that feels a little creepy to you. You shouldn't pull it apart and question it too much and reason your way out of it when your gut is telling you, you know what, this may not be right, you got to get out of here. Okay, so we have to be careful the way we apply self-inquiry. Okay, so I put this diagram together. This is not in the manual, but I think it just kind of clarifies the process a little bit. Okay, so first the triggers, right, as I was talking about before. So basically, any kind of painful, uncomfortable, challenging, unexpected, threatening, or uncertain experience. You could add a few more adjectives if you want. I was running out of space. All right, so that's your cue. That self-inquiry could be something to try. All right, so the usual with the red arrows down here is we might jump into a fixed mind or a fatalistic mind response, right? So the fixed mind response is kind of like, I know it already, there's nothing left to learn. I don't want to hear any feedback. I'm just going to do it the old way, stick to my old pattern, okay? Fatalistic mind is like, whatever, I just give up, nothing's going to work anyway, forget it, I'm just going to check out, okay? And those responses get us in trouble. See, like the dead plant, like it keeps us from growing. It literally, like we shrivel up and stay stagnant with those kinds of responses. And it also could damage relationships, because if we're closed off to other people and their feedback, they could, it could rub people the wrong way, and it could mess up our relationships, especially if some of the fixed mind has to do with like, attacking other people or defending ourselves in an aggressive kind of a way. All right. However, the green arrows, you could choose to respond to the triggers with self-inquiry instead, okay? A much more healthy response. So asking a series of questions about what could I learn from this experience, that kind of opens us up a lot more. Then that leads to more personal growth, right? Learning, being more flexible, so like flexible mind, openness, change, and insight, okay? So a lot of good stuff comes out of that, okay? And if you want to practice self-inquiry questions, look at my video from lesson 1B, okay? I'm not sure if I called it B on YouTube, but it's the second of the lesson ones I have. And there's a series of typical self-inquiry questions we could ask ourselves, okay? So I'm not going to go over those again now because they were covered then. But if you want a review of that, just watch that video again to refresh your mind, okay? Okay, so they contrast with healthy self-doubt and unhealthy self-doubt, okay? So there's a healthy version of self-doubt that self-inquiry is designed to stimulate, okay? And that has to do with, when we question ourselves, it's healthy because we're not always right, okay? There's a certain fallibility that we have. We're human, we don't know it all, and so we shouldn't take ourselves too seriously. So healthy self-doubt is about not taking ourselves too seriously and knowing we're questionable, okay? So knowing I could be wrong or incorrect and being okay with that and not having to fall apart when I realize that, or not having to blame other people when I'm in touch with that fact that I don't know it all, okay? Don't let it wound my ego too much, so to speak, okay? And even keeping a sense of humor at times, like, oh geez, look what I was thinking, where was my head, right? So it's okay not to know it, and it's okay to laugh about it. So again, taking responsibility, they keep rehashing that over and over again, this chapter, there's a lot of repetition, and also, of course, a willingness to learn, right? So when I doubt myself, I know I could throw away my current way of thinking and learn something new. So it creates more space for the newness once I, get rid of the stuff that's not working so much. Okay, unhealthy self-doubt. Okay, let me move my little box here. Okay, so this is much more unhealthy, as you could tell. So let's look at the quotes first, and then we'll go into the text on the left. So unhealthy self-doubt sounds kind of like this. See what you made me do? Your questioning has now made me question myself. I'm now miserable. Are you happy? Right? So it's like, how dare you make me question myself? Look how much you're hurting me. All right, so this is like a don't hurt me response. So if I complain and pout about it, the feedback I'm getting, for example, the function is to get people to back away, right? If I complain about it or whine or all that stuff, people are going to stop giving me feedback. And even though it temporarily makes me feel better, in the long run, I'm not going to learn as much because I'm not going to allow anyone in. People are going to keep their thoughts to themselves. They're still going to think it, but they're not going to share it with me. And I'm going to stay stuck, okay? Here's the other thought bubble. See, I'm admitting that I'm a bad person so you could stop expecting me to change because I've already told you that I'm no good, okay? So what's that doing? See, I'm like attacking myself before you get to attack me. I'm already lowering myself so far low that it's going to get you to back away from saying anything to me that might sound critical, right? It's kind of a protective move, but again, in the long run, you're not learning that much. Okay, so that's why this is unhealthy. Besides the fact that it's like a low self-esteem kind of response, it's damaging your relationship because people aren't going to feel like they can communicate with you, and you're pushing people away. All right. So associated with fatalistic mind. Forgot if I said that. So fatalistic mind, again, is kind of like falling apart and saying, oh, forget it, I give up, I can't do this, this is too hard, right? So you're kind of saying, I can't handle asking myself questions. I can't handle looking at myself. It's too much for me, right? So you're blocking the self-inquiry. So essentially, as you can guess, unhealthy self-doubt is when you fear self-examination. You're afraid of what you're going to see within yourself. And so you try not to look, okay? Doesn't mean it's going away. It just means you're not looking at it, okay? So there's a secret desire not to change or be challenged, or maybe not so secret. And, you feel like a victim of other people, like you're being wrongly accused or unjustly forced to re-examine yourself, like you're so above reproach, right? Okay, because sometimes, it's hard to take. We feel too wounded, but if we have a little more courage and we're willing to look, we can gain so much more, okay? So we might harbor secret anger or resentment toward people that trigger us. We might even lash out at them. And the social signals we give might block further feedback, like I was saying before. Okay, want to make sure I covered all the main points. Okay, so this is the last part. So outing ourselves. So one of the perks of self-inquiry is that it could actually help communication. So one thing we could do is if we do some self-inquiry on our own and we learn some things about ourselves, we could then maybe share some of our insights with somebody we trust. And by sharing some of our vulnerability and our insights, that actually could help increase the connection we have with that person, right? Because sometimes when we reveal something vulnerable and they respond to it appropriately, we feel more connected, okay? Another practice that we could do, and this is often done in groups for this lesson, is we could practice doing self-inquiry with each other. So let's say you and a friend are both kind of working on this. You could take turns doing self-inquiry in the presence of the other person. And the other person's job is to kind of listen and to encourage you to ask the kind of questions that get you toward your edge, right? And kind of keep you focused on it. So not to over-validate or reassure you, just kind of like allow you to kind of do it and to be there for you supportively as you do that, okay? So outing yourself is good because it goes opposite to any unwarranted shame that you might have, right? So if we're looking at something painful in ourselves, it might be something we're a little ashamed of, but shame thrives in secrecy. So in order to undo shame, we have to do opposite action and share it, okay? So if you did the self-inquiry on yourself on that painful thing and then you share it, it's gonna help to dissipate the shame, okay? Assuming that it's a supportive person that's gonna respond in a way that's helpful. Okay, so in the last lesson, under Describe with Humility, there was a technique called the awareness continuum, okay? So you could use that technique while you're sharing your insights from self-inquiry, all right? So just a quick reminder, although last lesson, you could check it out if you haven't already. It basically involves saying something like this. So I am aware of sensing, feeling, imagining, or thinking blank, okay? So you could share, I'm aware of the feeling of shame. I'm aware of sensing some tension in my body as I'm sharing this. I'm aware of imagining that, I should have been right, but I know I'm not right. I'm aware of myself thinking that maybe I need to change something, right? Or whatever it involves for you. You could use that phraseology to share with the other person. And it keeps the focus on you. It helps you take the responsibility without blaming anybody for your reactions. Okay, so again, modeling humility, a willingness to learn, and gives the other person an opportunity to maybe even give you some feedback, right? Or to help you see some of the blind spots that you missed during your own self-inquiries to kind of help you get a little bit closer to the truth, okay? And of course, helps the relationship, all right? So that's it. I mean, it's actually a pretty brief lesson because a lot of the group time, in this 2.5-hour group that it's supposed to be, is a lot of practice, okay? So you have to find your own opportunities to practice this, right? It's something experiential. So you have to just do it and not just try to understand it. All right, try to apply it to something that's meaningful to you. Okay, so I'll be back in the next lesson for the next 3 house skills, okay, which are similar to the original ones, but with an extra radically open DBT twist. All right, so thanks for listening. Keep asking yourselves those self-inquiry questions, and see you next time. Bye, everybody.